Sabine Hossenfelder, a former particle physicist, now turned right-wing grifter. Originally, in her early video, she was doing standard science communication, and she did excellent videos. There, she still does good videos from time to time. But not all of them are great. There are multiple examples that you see a slow trajectory of her content going to a right-wing direction and straight up false in many occasions. One example, my introduction to Sabina Hossenfeld was her video about trans athletes in women's sport in sports. It's a fair enough, and it was a good video that was pro-trans. Then she did a god awful video about about people with like on the autism spectrum, and then there another anti-trans video. And now recently, by the time I'm recording this, is the 5 days ago, should we defund academia? And she considers some form of right-wing nonsense. Where it's like censorship and stuff like that, similar to Jordan Peterson. But the problem is, she is a pro-capitalist, but science is inherently revolutionary, specifically more consistent with the philosophy of anarchism, because it doesn't care about hierarchical institution, it's the discovery of knowledge about the external world. And to say otherwise is to spit at the face of all the scientists who contributed to it. A good example is like in a field that was hindered by capitalism was the agricultural revolution in the United States by Charles Fort. And I quote the historian: when the land is free or cheap, it was in a different large portion of the population to escape wage labor, right? The regions of the United States before the 1830s, there was no compulsion for farmers to introduce labor-saving technology. As a result, independent household production hindered the development of capitalism by allowing the large portion of the population to escape wage labor. Like I said, academia is one of the very few places where anarchistic adjacent style approach is still relevant, right? At least in the world of science and technology, and to a lesser extent philosophy. Under our current hierarchical, centralized statist capitalist society, and under the United States, basically a fascist regime right now, is the who trying to live quote unquote all corruption bureaucrats, but in reality, the more you do that, the more problems they have, because the state cannot function without bureaucrats. To eliminate the bureaucrat, you have to eliminate the state, and that's not what they don't want. They still want to maintain hierarchy, not a non-hierarchical society like true revolutionaries. As for example, as Albert Mercer pointed out, that any government body is the embodiment of the real organization of the broad masses, the majority, where the government exists, then the only really organized people are the minority who make up the government. And if the masses do organize, they do so against it, outside of it, or at the very least independently of it. It is ossifying into a government. The revolution as such will fall apart. On an account, it is awarding that government the monopoly of organizing and the means of struggle. And to these, the scientific community are examples of revolution within the constraints of our society. But many examples fought against in many cases. Like, for example, many scientists are very open research, open access, even though people like Bill Gates are against it. And many people will gladly share their research against the idea of copyright, for example. There's a entire amazing essay by Kevin Carson. It talks about how copyright is harmful. I already did a video years ago about why copyright and intellectual property in general not only goes against science, but is harmful to society as a whole. A great example by Peter Kropotkin in his last ever work, Modern Science and Anarchy. The idea echoes a vision that what can be done, and we see in practice on multiple occasions in revolutionary Spain, for example. The idea of an independent communes for the territorial groupings, a vast federation of trade unions for grouping by social functions. The two interwoven provide support to each to meet the needs of society, allowing the anarchist to conceptualize in a real concrete way the possible organization of a liberated society. These groupings covering each other like a network, which does allow the satisfaction for all social needs, consumption, production, and exchange, communication, sanitary arrangement, education, mutual protection against aggression, mutual aid and territorial defense, etc. Now, the internet was created under the principles of anarchy, a decentralized hierarchical structure in the 1950s. We could have had the internet in the 1950s during the Soviet Union, but the government was against it because they want centralized control. And even then, the internet, as we know now, in the beginning was very anarchist functioning until slowly the capitalist system tried to implement systems because they cannot have control if they keep it as it is, right? Even right now with AI or currently some form of consciousness, like ChatGPT 4, for example, they are possess some form of function, possess some form of consciousness. Many studies about these types of AI, many of them have a left libertarian anarchist bias already. Even Sabine Hossenfelder made a video about that. She should acknowledge that AI, who has so much information about everything, yet still come to the conclusion of anarchism, at least at some shape or form. Like like I said, the capitalists provide education. For example, only 6.4% of the global population had college degrees, right? As anarchists who were early supporters of science, they believe, like Mikhail Bakunin has pointed out, there's much more practical intellectual common sense in an intrinsic aspiration and the real needs of the masses of the people than in the profound intelligence of all those doctors and teachers of mankind who, after so many fruitless attempts to make humanity happy, still aspire to add their own efforts. Because scientists, for example, people want to be scientists because they want to. Uh, Money is like a secondary issue. That wasn't their priority. I want to be an astronomer. I want to be a chemist. I want to be an evolutionary biologist. I want to study abiogenesis. I want to understand the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. I want to understand neuroscience to solve the hard problem of consciousness, etc. and etc. Like, for example, our education system based on the Prussian model, which is inherently authoritarian, unlike the anarchists who developed what's called the modern school movement, originating in Spain. In modern school, there was no punishment or rewards, exams or more. The everyday tortures of conventional schooling, and because practical knowledge is more useful than theory, lessons were often held in factories, museums, or in the countryside. The school was used by parents. The favorite planner in the public university, and I quote, the higher education for the privileged few should be for the general public. As a human, as a right to know, and science, which is a product by observers and workers of all countries and ages, are not to be restricted to class. It's encouraging a self-education, cooperation, egalitarian, libertarian atmosphere, which the pupil, regardless of age, can develop themselves and their interests to the fullest of their abilities. If the in this way, Monaco seek to create anarchists by a process of education with respect of the individual gets them to develop their own abilities in conducting settings. And this can be through in academic universities. We see examples during like A.S. Neil's book Summer Hill is the most well-known example of this practice. And we see scientists doing by their own research independently to do this. And even with the institution, they go against capitalism, like vaccines and insulins where they deny copyright because they want to save the 200 million people infected by diseases, and they don't care about money. This is academia under a capitalist society is inherently right wing, not left wing. We see some cases where the people on the left get more censor on the right, not like what the mainstream media actually says. If the left gets more censored than the right. Now we see people protesting for Palestinians are gonna get arrested, deported, but you don't see people doing the same, doing pro-Russian protests, for example. A great example would be from Enrico Malatesta, who has specialized how he can be seen in an educational and a scientific environment. Organization of social life by means of free association federation of producers and consumers, created and modified according to the wishes of their members, guided by science and experience, and free from any kind of imposition which does not spring from natural needs, to which everyone, convinced by a feeling of overriding necessity, voluntarily submits. As revolutionary organizes itself from the bottom up. A great example would be in the realm of medicine and doing research and help the sick, right? Under anarchism, for example, such a system of socialized healthcare where medical service will be free of charge to all inhabitants of the communes. Doctors will not be like capitalists trying to extract the greatest profit from their unfortunate patients. They will be employed by the commune and expected to treat everyone with the needs they service. Moreover, preventing ill play an important part as medical treatment is only a curative side of the science of healthcare. It is not enough to treat the sick, it is also necessary to prevent diseases. That is the true function of hygiene. The same can go to public services and other similar works that science heavily has to implement. Last and not least, our current institutions under hierarchical centralized capitalist society provides true innovation science. For example, in anarchists, we do not think that social life can be reduced to political economic associations alone. Individuals have many different interests and desires which they must express in order to have truly free and fulfilling life. Therefore, under a truly non-hierarchical academia, we see the development of numerous voluntary associations and groups to express these interests. For example, there will be consumer groups, musical groups, scientific association, art association, clubs, housing cooperation associations, crafts and hobby guilds, fan clubs, animal rights organizations, groups based of gender, sexuality, creed, and race, and other things which we see they're trying to dismantle the trans one and critical race theory. As Critical Calkin has pointed out in his book The Conquest of Bread, he who wished for a grand piano will enter the Association of Musical Instrument Makers, and buying the association part of his day leisure, he will soon possess the piano of his dream. If he is fond of astronomy, he will join the Association of Astronomers. He will have the telescope desired by taking his share of the associated work. In short, the 5 or 7 hours a day which will have at his disposal after having concentrated several hours to production of necessity will imply sufficient to satisfy all longing for luxury. However varied, thousands of associations will undertake to supply them, and that is the power of production in the people. A great example of science and academia today is inherently right wing and not left wing that Hossenfelder has pointed out. A great example would be the 18th century in the rise of modern chemistry and the and physical science, physics. For example, and the works of Peter Crockett, wage work is serf work. It cannot and must not produce or co-produce. It is a high time to disbelieve the legend which presents wagedom as the best incentive to produce work. If industry nowadays bring in 100 times more than it did in the days of our grandfather, it is due to the sudden awakening of physical and chemical science toward the end of the 18th century, not to the capitalist organization of wagedom, but in spite of that organization. In spite of it, we see that all the time in computer science and cybernetics in particular. Many things that happen in spite of it. The fuck all of these things. That shows that science is in danger of our institutions are inherently capitalist in nature, holding back science. I already did this before, talk about this before. I even wrote a book about my overall personal opinions of philosophy and everything, which got shut down by blog posts. I will try to repost it in this comment section or in the description and the sources that I talk about today's video. But Sabine Hossenfelder has been a grifter, and sad to see how things go because it's easy to make money spreading fascist monarchist propaganda than to actually spread the truth.